Hello, hello. Welcome to the Autism 360 podcast, the 360 Method, a weekly podcast where we talk about everything Autism 360. Every week, we catch you up with what's going on in the program, talking to team members, special guests, and talking all things mindset, as well as everything relevant that autism parents think about. This week, I'm so delighted to welcome back our guest, Kirstie Wishart from Starfish Sensory Store to talk about sensory support and answer some of the questions that we have left over from her wonderful guest speaker series that she's done with us here on the program. I'm your host, Ella Bailey. I'm an Autism 360 veteran coach and explorer of all things parenting support. And so welcome to our lovely listeners. Hooray. We care about you and your thoughts. And so whether you're a program member or not, we would love to hear from you. Please drop us a line at hello@autism360.com. We would love your feedback. And if you want Kirstie back, would like to ask some more questions, then you've got to drop us a line so that we know. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land I live and work, and from where this podcast is being broadcast today. And also make a disclaimer that this podcast does not substitute for medical advice. If you have concerns about yourself or about a loved one, please do reach out to an allied health professional. It's so lovely to have you, Kirstie. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. And thank you for having me back. This is always such fun.
It's always such fun and such good info for what can be a bit of a bewildering landscape for parents, would you say, getting in touch with sensory needs and finding the items that their kids need. Do you find confusion for parents in general?
I think it's always overwhelming when you're first starting out. Yes. And it can be a little bit tricky because there's not a one size fits all, yes, especially when it comes to sensory needs, because people have a sensory diet that's unique to them. So it's never going to be, right, this is a diagnosis, here's your prescription. It just isn't that easy.
Yes, you're right. And sometimes they change. Even when we do find something that works, it may not stay the same.
So true. Or just when you think, oh, yes, something that works.
Something
later, or even that afternoon.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got to have a whole host of strategies in your kit bag.
Yeah, a sensory tool belt. So I think we should start off with giving a bit of context. What would you say is one of the main reasons that autistic people, and I guess more broadly, everyone, can benefit from having sensory support in their lives?
Number one priority would be to help regulate.
Totally.
That would be the primary reason, because the ability to function at home or in the community or at work is, number one, underpinned by a healthy level of regulation. If you're well regulated, you can learn, you can contribute, you can communicate. If you're unregulated or dysregulated, you're much more hypersensitive or withdrawn, and it's much more difficult to do the things that you want to be able to do in life, whatever age you are. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've learned since working and learning more about sensory stuff is that I need to wear my noise cancelling headphones in Aldi. I just find that I can sustain attention and I feel less stressed if I can just bring down that input slightly. I'm not listening to anything in the headphones. I'm just tuning everything out.
Yeah. I'm not autistic. That said, I know it's hard to believe, actually an introvert. And when I'm at a 2-day, when I'm at a 2-day expo, talking to especially people that I don't know and I'm not very good at small talk, I use a 305 gram Kaiko hand roller all day. So it's weighted and it keeps my hand moving. It's giving me lots of input. And I use it all day, so much so that I forget that I'm actually doing it. But it helps me keep grounded.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you
Amazing.
go.
The things you learn about yourself when you're learning about these things, right? We've got some really interesting questions left over from our webinar. So I say we just launch into those and see where it takes us, hey?
Yeah, love it. All
We've
right.
got one that says, my child has heaps of functional skills, can communicate verbally and goes to a mainstream school. He's 9 years old. However, he's constantly chewing on his clothing. He chews on the cuffs of his jumpers and the collars of his T-shirts. Any tips or suggestions?
Yes, that's a really common one.
Yes, definitely.
When it comes to clothing, so when it comes to chewing and chews, there's a couple of things that we, first of all, when selecting a chew that they might actually use as an alternative. In terms of, like, I have an education background, and one of the things we would say is, if you don't tell a child to stop doing something, you need to provide an alternative, because they might actually stop doing that particular behavior, take up something worse.
Exactly.
You want to provide something that's more functional, more constructive, and a healthier option. So what we want to do, if we know that that child is chewing, to help them regulate. Kids and adults do things instinctively. They're driven towards items or strategies that will help them regulate. So the fact that they're chewing, they need to be chewing to help them regulate. Usually, not always, but usually it's around anxiety or providing, because when you're chewing, you're actually getting loads of proprioceptive and vestibular input in the jaw, and it's very powerful. So we naturally chew. A lot of people chew chewing gum, but the fact that he's chewing his clothes, they're getting really wet, we want to provide an alternative. So look at what they're chewing and look at how often they're chewing. Look at where in their mouth they're chewing. So if it is at the front of the teeth, are they using their tongue? Is it the back molars? Are they stretching their mouth? Look at how they're chewing, because that can help guide you when it comes to selecting the most beneficial chew. So with clothing, that is not super hard. So I would go a soft to, most chews are graded from a soft, if we're talking ARC, which is probably the best known chews, highly regarded by therapists, designed by therapists actually, because that particular brand is run by therapists, allied health services in the US. And the silicone that they use is slightly different to what is used in the chews that you might get from China. And that's how they actually are able to grade their chews. They are color coded according to level of firmness, if you like. So there's S for soft. The ones that we stock, they're red, and they're quite flexible. They give quite a bit of they have a lot of give. They're fairly bendable. I would probably go that as a clothing substitute. The next level is XT, or extra tough. So that's got more firmness. So if you're a fairly moderate chewer, you might want to go for that. If a chewer is chewing on literally iPad cases, really hard things, and wearing through those, you definitely want to go the extra tough. And some of those are as hard as a rock. When it comes to the style of chew, look at where your child or loved one or yourself are chewing. So if you're going to the back molars, you want to get a chew that's got a good reach. You might look at, say, for instance, the brick chews. They've got different textures as well, so it gives different sensory input as well, depending on your preference. Some chews, if they're working their tongue, might have, like I'm thinking of the Ninja. I wish I had some here, but I could go and grab them, but I don't want you to lose your listeners. The Ninja chew has got some, for want of a better word, holes in it, in the design, and that gives the opportunity for the tongue to do some work as well. So you can look at chews, and in terms of a clothing substitute, I would go soft. There are a couple of fabric chews. You can see them on our website that are a good alternative as well, because we know that that particular child is seeking out a fairly soft, flexible and material. So that might be an alternative, and they're really easy. They have a Velcro strap to take off, throw in the wash, and Bob's your uncle. So you'd probably want to get a couple. They come in different colors, so you can match school uniforms and things like that. So that's another option. The other thing you can do is when we talk about a sensory diet, one of the things that we can do is schedule oral input through the day. So rather than wait for a child or a person to become dysregulated and need to chew because they may be becoming anxious, or they're in sensory overload or whatever, what we can do, say in the car on the way to school, we might provide them with some oral input. And it doesn't have to be a chew. It could be chewing gum. It could be crunchy foods. That crunchy foods can be quite alerting. It could be thick shakes through a thin straw, and that's giving you loads of heavy work. So chewy foods tend to be more regulating. So you can have food, you can be blowing bubbles, you could be using you know those like they're party favors, and you blow in the pipe and you've got to try and get the ball to land into the little basket. Obviously, that depends on safety and whether it's a choking hazard and things like that. But there are loads of different oral input toys and games and resources that can provide an alternative as well to chewing. So you could schedule times during the day to provide that oral input to help them be regulated. Yeah, especially prior to a situation where you thought that they might become dysregulated. I hope that helps.
Yeah, there's some great options there. I think a real takeaway point is that proactive strategy, right? Like we'll see if we are doing that scheduling and we're getting in before there's a real need for kind of really intense chewing on whatever he can get access to. If we can give him a little bit of input before that of a similar kind, that's going to be helpful. Amazing. Thank you. We've got my 4-year-old is constantly moving around to the extent that we struggle to get him to sit with us to practice the things our speechy requires us to practice. Do you have any suggestions? Oh, this is one I see a lot. The constant movement like a whirling dervish.
Yes. So, well, interestingly, because a lot of, as you would know, we run a specialist tutoring centre here.
Yeah.
The last term I had a few parents that would actually sit in, and their kid would be sitting on, like we at our desk, I'll just, the office is pretty messy, but just ignore that. But we always have chairs.
Spinning chairs, yeah.
Anyway, and they can do a bit of bouncing as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, the parents, they often say, "Oh my goodness, sit still." And I go, "No, they're fine." Because often they're working with me or Kath, our other tutor, after they've had a full day of school, they're tired. And naturally, and many of our kiddos do have ADHD, not all, but a high proportion anyway. And they're spinning and they're rocking, and I go, no, they're actually doing what they need to do, because vestibular input is waking them up. It's alerting the central nervous system, and they're much more likely to be able to attend to our sessions. So I've got no problem with them moving. What I would do is provide a way for them to move that also allows them what in a teaching term we call academic engaged time. So they can still be working. I couldn't care. I'm so used to it. It's like water off a duck's back if they're rocking and spinning. I don't care, because we're still getting the work done. So what I would do is, clearly that child is showing you that they need some vestibular input. And also, if there is a task that does require them to be fairly still, I would always do some heavy work. So one particular boy that I worked with, man, he was tough work. I had to break out all my skills. So the very first thing we did, we've got carpet, it's a short pile in the store, and we've got a double, like a big long scooter board, and he would do scooter board all around our shop while he was saying the times tables, mind you, because didn't want to waste any time. He'd so much heavy work, especially on carpet. Then I'd pop him into our the compression sensory swing, the Harkler one, and I would always do rhythmic linear movement. So because that is giving him the vestibular input, but it's also in a compression swing, so he's getting a nice full body squeeze. But the linear rhythmic movement is helping him to ground. It's no coincidence that when we're with infant babies trying to get them off to sleep, we do rhythmic movements, even the drum beat, for instance, on their back or bottom, for instance. We just instinctively know to do that. So I would do heavy work. I would get them to do some load up the wheelbarrow or the shopping from the car, get some heavy work done, get a scooter board and get them doing some fun, heavy work, make it hard. Like, yeah, don't make it too easy on tiles. And then I would follow it with some rhythmic swinging. If you go, yeah, but it's raining outside, I can't go outside, blah, blah, blah. We use in my home, we've got a $15 chin-up bar from Kmart. It holds 100 kilo. And I thought, oh, I bet you that will fall, blah, blah, blah. I bet you it'll mark the paint. No, it does not. It does not mark. And we moved into a brand new house and I was a bit worried about taking it from our old place. No, beautiful. And so you can also get a $50 chin-up bar from Rebel. It holds 130 kilo. And they fit a wider door frame if your door frames aren't standard. So we've got that at home, and we've got a compression swing at home as well. So we can easily put that up and down. It's so easy. So if you don't want to attach a swing, say the compression swing, because it comes with all you need to put into a beam. If you don't want to do that, you can use a chin-up bar and it works a treat, I promise, even with adults. It works beautifully. So I would do this after I've done some heavy work. I would do vestibular linear input, and I would absolutely invest in a spinning chair. Doesn't have to be expensive, from IKEA. That's where ours came from, and I love them. The other thing you could do if you don't want to do that is obviously a wobble cushion or a Sensi saddle roll. Personally, I prefer the Sensi saddle roll. That's like the peanut. Kids can sit on them like a horse, and it does mean they get that bounce, but it's a little bit more restricted than an exercise ball, because an exercise ball you can go in multiple directions. A Sensi saddle roll you tend to go up and down, and that way they can still get their work done. So yeah, there's still a bit of a cunning choice there. So they are definitely they work. It works. Yes. Always follow vestibular with proprioceptive input, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So do your vestibular input and your heavy work, which is actually prop as well, but always follow it with prop. Yeah, a squeeze, compression, vibration massager. They're $20. They're nothing. They're so cheap. Great option for proprioceptive input. All right. Sorry.
Amazing. Oh, I love that. There's so many kind of practical things that this family can
Yes.
do. Yeah, absolutely. We've got one from a teen parent. Now, teen parents are, I think, lots of things that we can do with our younger kids. Our teens will stop accepting after a while. They'll not be on board. So we've got a teen parent who's saying that they have a teen who used to hugely benefit from a regular sensory diet when she was younger. She was regulated by both proprioceptive input in the form of heavy work and swinging. However, now she's a teenager and she doesn't want to engage in those activities. And this mum can tell that her teen's regulation is suffering and is wondering, have you dealt with this? What do you do? Suggestion.
Yep. Yes. Okay. I'd need to have a little think about alternative vestibular input teenagers. But proprioception, I would definitely be looking at a cloud sac. If you have NDIS funding and you're plan managed or self-managed, go direct to cloud sac because it's cheaper, frankly, than to go through someone else like us. If you're agency managed, you have to go through someone like our business, but otherwise go direct to cloud sac. Teenagers and young adults love them, and they are basically a very fancy, large beanbag without the noise. So you get in and it gives you a nice full body squeeze. Just a word of warning with cloud sacs and similar, when they say kids, that's the smallest one, it still fits an adult. I can't remember all the sizes. Mondo might be the next one, Grande might, and you think, oh yeah, I've got a big strapping, 17-year-old, I'll get the Grande. It'll take half their bedroom up. And you actually see, because I belong to a few like Facebook autism groups and stuff like that, and you've seen them all the time, people trying to get rid of them because they take too much room up. Just be careful, measure up, just be aware of how big they are. But that is a really good one for teenagers and that age appropriate sort of appeal. The other thing I would do is look at Kaiko. So there's Kaiko products are not just fidgets, even though they started out as fidgets. Many of their products do provide what I would call targeted deep pressure and sometimes weight, like the hand rollers. They are designed for teenagers and adults in mind. So they are the place that I would go to. We do sell a lot of their products, not all their range, but most of it. So in terms of proprioceptive input, we're looking for weight, so the hand rollers. Another one that's really cool is the wheel spinner. I just love that one. So it's one of my favorites because you can take, it's like a very fancy, fidget spinner, but you can take some of the arms off. And when you take one, it gives you this wobble that gives so much cool proprioceptive input. You can feel it. It's very cool. Almost like a vibration and a beating. Another one that gives targeted deep pressure input, so proprioceptive input, is the spiky. Now, the spiky is a ring. It's like a very tight old-fashioned telephone cord, basically, and you roll them up and down your fingers, but they give a lot of pressure. They're tight. So you roll them up and down your fingers, or you put them in the palm of your hand, you squeeze it. A lot of the people that find these ones helpful tend to be those that are highly anxious, or they bite their nails, they pick the skin, they self-harm, they bite, etc. So it's a safe way of providing quite an intense, targeted, deep pressure, but without breaking the skin. That was so successful that they actually brought out the wrist spikies that are like a bangle. And once again, you roll them up and down. But I actually quite like them. So I guess it says something about me. But I like flicking it. And you can get different sizes in those. So they're giving proprioceptive input. Those are the things that I'd be looking, and so Kaiko is designed by an OT who has two sons that are teenagers that are neurodiverse. So they were looking for items that weren't babyish, frankly, that were cool, that almost like industrial look that you wouldn't care if people saw you with it. But many of them are very discreet. So they'd be another thing that I'd be looking at. In terms of vestibular ways to provide vestibular input for a teenager and adult, as I'm here with you, I'm spinning. I would look at a type of chair, like they don't even and they will gravitate towards. So I would be looking at something like what I'm on to provide that vestibular input, but in a very appropriate, discreet way. Anything that has your head moving or working against gravity is providing vestibular input, hence rocking, hence hanging upside down, hence spinning. Anything that is challenging our balance is challenging and holding our head upright is challenging our vestibular system. Yeah. And I'm just wondering what activities might be a good one, like gymnastics and things. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to have a think about that. That's after school or after work or whatever. I'm just trying to think of hobbies and things that, or sports or whatever that might challenge, like be a good vestibular, almost like plugging it in through their day or their week, so they're getting that vestibular input. Yeah, but in a really constructive way. Yeah.
I had a teen family who their boy went to parkour classes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so he did that, I think, 2 afternoons a week, and so he was kind of bouncing from wall to wall and really using his body to move himself around in space. And because it was basically a solo sport, you don't need to do a whole bunch of chatting with people or distraction in that way. He found that a really good option for his regulation. And again, it's quite cool. It's a bit funky. Teens love that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Even those, I mean, I guess it's something, an activity that you could do once or twice a week, but even those trampoline,
yes, absolutely.
They'd be fantastic, but they do tend, whether there's time of days that are for teenagers and adults, because in the mornings they're sort of overrun by little kiddos, which is great for them. But in terms of having practical vestibular input at home when they're sort of aged out of swings, although do you ever really age out of a swing?
I don't think we do. I think we love swings forever.
One thing you could do, like I know at Aldi recently, they had one of those hanging baskets on a stand, because we've got one at home hanging on our back deck, and every now and then we swap it out for when the kids are over with the Harker compression swing. But I reckon nearly every day I have my coffee out in that hanging basket and I'm just rocking. Yeah, maybe I can self-diagnose, but anyway, certainly that's a really age-appropriate way to provide, getting away from the more childish swings to something that's more, that is designed for adults.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. And we've got a final question here that is something that I hear a lot, from all kinds of parents kids who have all kinds of different sensory needs. And it comes a lot after I've suggested something to them, like a swing or whatever. And it's that I'm constantly told different things about what is okay to charge for and what isn't for sensory items on the NDIS. I wanted to get my child something to climb on, as when he's heightened, he wants to climb everything. What do? I keep getting mixed messages. Do you hear this a lot as well? You're nodding like you do. All the time.
On the daily.
Yeah.
And sometimes we absolutely know what they've been told is incorrect, either by a plan manager or whatever. So there is a lot of misinformation out there. A couple of things. The good news is, if you are say, for instance, your plan is plan managed and you keep getting told no, NDIS won't fund sensory items. That is not true. There is nothing in the legislation that says that you cannot purchase sensory items with your NDIS funding. That is not true. I will just say, though, plan managers are responsible for, if they put so say a business like us sends a plan manager for a customer. They put an order in online and we send an invoice to the plan manager, and the plan manager approves it and makes the payment. Then the items go off to the customer. It's all pretty sweet. That's how it works. If the plan manager gets audited and the NDIA say to them, how come you paid that invoice? They should not have been able to buy that item or those items or whatever. No, we're not going to give you that money. And the plan manager rings the customer and says, or their client, NDIS refused to pay. Can you pay us the money? And the customer says, no, I don't have that money. So the plan manager has to bear the cost of that. So that tends to be why many plan managers are being very, very cautious. Do you need a letter from an allied health professional for a low cost, low risk assisted technology and consumable item? No, you should not. That's crazy. That's like, that letter could cost you $185 or $280 or whatever to get, not to mention the time, and your kiddo needed that item now. That's absurd. The item itself might have been, I don't know, $50, and you're spending $300 or $200 for a letter to justify a low cost, low risk item. No. Okay. So just keep that in mind when you're making your purchases or your choices. If you are self-managed, you do have a whole lot more choice and control. Even though we are NDIA, so we are providers, so it's great for us if everybody is agency managed, because then they need to purchase from businesses like ours. But even though that's the case, we do tend to encourage people to self-manage the core part of their funding, or at least the consumables, because you can then purchase items from wherever you need to meet your child or loved ones or your own needs. There is a difference between when you have your planning meeting and you say, this is what I'm going to need, and your LAC puts it in and you receive your funding package. That is very different to how you choose to spend or use your funding on the goods and services that you need. So what the NDIS will fund in a planning stage is very different to how you can spend your funding once you've got it. So just keep that very separate. So when you're in a planning meeting, obviously you need to be saying, this is the goals of my plan and I'm going to need this to make that happen. Once you've got your funding, how that is used is, if you're self-managed, is up to you. How do you then make choices? There is a can I buy it checklist on the NDIS website, but I've got a better one. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to get it off the wall.
Amazing. We love a good, just a simple, clear checklist, I think, is the kind of information that people need.
That's exactly right. I'm going to hold it up to the camera just there. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it. And for those who are listening, we will pop a link to it in the show notes for you to have access to. It says, can I spend my NDIS money on this? Yes, no, and then different examples. Love it.
So what I would say, that is a modification of the one that is on the NDIS website, and it was done by the Growing Space. So do you follow the Growing Space?
I don't, but I clearly should.
Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm a disciple, actually.
Amazing. Yeah.
So the growing space is run by Sam Payer, and she has lived experience with disabilities. She has a son that is neurodiverse and a son who has Down syndrome. They're in their 20s. She's been there, done that. She is on the NDIS advisory board, and she really knows her stuff. She runs the growing space, which started out, is a support coordination service based in Adelaide. And she only ever employs people with lived experience of disabilities. And these days they have people all around Australia. So this list, you must follow her on Instagram or Facebook. And she runs workshops on Can I Buy It? That's what it's called. And I've done the workshop twice. We hosted one here. Sam flew up from Adelaide and we hosted a seminar here. So it's a couple of hours.
Awesome.
Maybe it costs $120. Best $120 you'll ever spend when it comes to the NDIS. You'll feel so much more empowered. But just very quickly, can you buy the item? If you've got funding under consumables, that is, for core, in core under consumables. If you've got young children and because often, not always, but often you'll find, I don't know why, but it seems to be the case at the moment, the trend, children are not getting any funding under core if they're young children, because most of the funding is in capacity building for therapy. That's crazy, really, because we know that we need provide lots of supports at home to support the therapy that they're doing once a fortnight. Anyway, hopefully that will change. But because of that anomaly, there is the capacity to have an amount of funds allocated under capacity building for low cost, low risk, for consumables, basically. So just be aware, like if they say, oh no, you get no funding for consumables if you've got a 3-year-old, you can, but you need to advocate, you need to know that. But anyway, let's just say you've got funding under core for consumables. Very first thing you need to ask is the item that you are purchasing or wanting to purchase, is it disability related? That's your number one. Like if you have twins and one has a disability and one doesn't, would you be buying this item for the child that doesn't have a disability? Well, if you say yes, well, you have to wonder, like if you were going to be, should you be buying that item anyway for your child with a disability? So your number one question is the item you're wanting to buy, would you be buying that if your child didn't have a disability? So the things that you'd be looking at are their level of need, and the other thing is the age. So if I was a 19-year-old and I couldn't leave the house without a form of stress ball, yes, I would imagine I should be able to use my NDIS funding because, okay, maybe you expect a 7-year-old to have a fidget spinner because they were a trend, but you don't expect a 19-year-old to have one. That is disability related. So that's unique. Number one, is it disability related? And if you need to be buying that, and you wouldn't normally be buying that if your child didn't have a disability, that's your number one question. So just know that what the NDIS fund and how you choose to spend that funding are two different things. And this checklist that is available from the growing space, and so is their workshops, please do it. You will feel so much more confident. That's your number one question. Of course, there's other things like, is it working towards the goals of the plan? Is it cost effective? Like the NDIS aren't going to be paying for a gold and diamond studded fidget spinner. I know I'm being a little bit facetious, but you know what I mean. It needs to be an affordable, cost effective. It needs to not be funded by another government body. That's why you can't get tutoring or you shouldn't get tutoring with NDIS funding, because there's a government body that's called schools, even though many of us would know that, it can be a battle in the schooling system to get the supports that your child needs, if they have significant needs. Anyway, that's another conversation. They are the most pertinent. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions. And if you can tick yes to all of those, then it's highly likely you could use your NDIS funding. Can I say definitively? No, because every circumstance is different. But that checklist and that I would definitely recommend doing the workshop, would give you so much more confidence. If there was anything tricky, or your plan manager said, no, you cannot purchase that Harkler compression swing. Like, most families do not have a Harkler compression swing mounted on a chin-up bar in their home. It is disability related. Like, that's not, most people don't have that. And if your plan manager, for instance, is saying, no, NDIs don't fund swings, that's not true. They don't actually say that. It's not in the legislation. What I would do is I would go through that, and I would put all my reasoning down. So if there was anything that you were sort of a little bit, not the grey area, you're not sure, go through this and put your justifications on that and send that through to your plan manager. And if they say, no, we're still not funding it, we go, you know what, it's not your money. I know you are responsible for making the payments, but I'm actually going to change my plan manager, or I'm going to go self-managed. If you in good conscience can complete that and you've got your reasoning there, go for it. That said, as I said, there is no definitive answer.
Yeah.
The whole beauty of the NDIS is that it was meant to give people choice and control.
Yeah.
That also does mean that there's no definitive black and white, because everybody is different.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's why it can be so confusing for people who are trying to kind of understand what they can and can't do. But I love that those resources are available, and I will make sure that the links and stuff are available in the show notes for everybody listening to the podcast. Thank you for coming and chatting with me today, Kirstie. I so appreciate your time. Such a wealth of knowledge. And I'm sure that we can we'll get some interesting questions and come back and tease your brain again.
I'd love that. And I love chatting with you. You're so good at what you do.
Oh, stop it. And I wanted also
give that, and I'll send it to you. Yeah,
that would be awesome. Thank you. So thank you for listening this week to the Autism 360 podcast. Next week, we'll be back with another topic that's relevant to things that autism parents think about. And until then, think 360.